And then I was also a captain in the fire station with a fire crew. So I did the 48-hour shifts and ran a fire engine and a paramedic squad. And then I also was as an engine boss for the state of California for the Office of Emergency Services. So whenever there was a wildfire throughout the state of California, I'd get on our little engine, and we'd go away for 14 to 21 days at a time anywhere in the state and fight these big wildland fires that you see. So I've got the experience on both sides of the firehouse. The active firefighting, seeing it. When over the years, I've taken pictures of houses before, during, and after, and use that information on the prevention side of the house to help develop codes. I've served on many California codes, wildland interface codes. So the Chapter 7A that's in the building code for wildland structures. I actually started working on that committee back in 1993, the international code. Of course, it didn't come into the code till 2007. That's government for you, but we've been working on it for a while. So again, I retired and just wasn't ready to sit down yet. So education's been I love teaching and presenting. Everybody in our company they're all wildland firefighters with 30 years of experience. So April is here. We do this because it's fun. I drove down from Pasadena today. I picked up Jay, and I'll introduce Jay in a minute. Just because it's fun to get together and still be in the firefight without actually fighting the fire. So I'd like to introduce April. April, could you just introduce yourself real quick?
Hello everybody, April Schwartz. I'm a former firefighter paramedic. I actually worked with Rich for many years over in Sierra Madre and also the Harbor Heights Fire Department. And I work for Allied as an operations manager, and I'm also a project manager. So I work very closely with fire safe councils. I help them reach their goals as far as making their communities fire-wise, and we want to be able to do as many of these events as possible and spread as much education as possible, just to try to make people's communities safer. So that's our goal, and I see projects start to finish. So I will go out and do a wildfire inspection or a community for a whole community as well, or an individual home, and put together wildfire reports. We go over them together, and we just look at every home individually and see what their vulnerable areas are, and then try to help them from there. So whether it's ember-resistant vents or gutter guards or mesh, we use almost every product out there that's approved for wildfire. So we help with the installation. I organize all of the planning and all of the construction, and then when it's done, we have a certification that we can give saying that you are your home. So, and we do a lot more. I do a lot more also. Build relationships and do a lot of the expos and the education events as well. So kind of all over the place, but this is my favorite. Is these education events. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
We'll talk a little bit more about that during the presentation.
You said you do individual homes. Would I sign up to have you come look at my home, or what's the
We can talk about that.
Okay.
After the presentation, I think might answer some of your questions. We're here as long as you need to be here today. Yeah. And then one of my best friends for over 35 years. I think we were 5 years old when you must have been. Right? Yeah. Thank you for recognizing it. You don't look that old. Ahead of time. No, Jay Lopez. He was. I'll let you introduce yourself. He found out we were coming down today, and it's like we haven't hung out in a long time. So he says, "Wow, that's a long drive. Let's cruise together."
This is important to do.
Yeah.
Yes, madam. So right now, Jay Lopez, I retired from Los Angeles County Fire Department in the Prevention Bureau for about 34 years, a little less than Rich. But right now I'm working for this governor's office. I'm on the State Board of Forestry and Fire Protection. The State Board of Forestry oversees all the fire agencies in the state and the protection activities in the state. So this is something big for us to see what's going on in the field. But also working on this called the California Wildfire Mitigation Program. And the California Wildfire Mitigation Program is looking to seek, and I'm the head of the pilot program, to get state and federal funding to help people retrofit their homes in what Rich is going to cover in here. So right now we have $95 million. We have 6 pilots communities throughout the state. One of them is not far from you here. It's in Dulcura, Potrero, south part of San Diego County, and then another one's the other 5 in another part of the state. But we think that this is where the niche that we haven't been able to do. We do all the defensible space and all that, but the homes still burn. But we know that stuff like this works. We know the home hardening, wildfire home hardening is an answer. It's something that we can do. And the efforts that Allied is doing, it got aligned right away with what the state is doing. So I'm working on that as well. Also, I'm a board member of the California Fire State Council board director. So I like to see you guys, Fire State Council's active. So when Rich said, hey, you want to come and see? I heard a lot about you guys, so I wanted to come and see you. And lastly, I'm also a client of Allied. So I have a home against the mountains on Los Angeles County against the Angeles National Forest. And I got that notice from my insurance company saying, well, I think your home needs to be doing some work. I said, well, let's take it to the next level. Let's make the home the best chances for our home, my family, our dear possessions to survive. So Allied has been fantastic helping me because I can go and try to call different people, but they have it all in a package. So they've been helping me to do that. So I took in my 1960 homes, ranch style, all the way to the latest building standards, like it was a brand new home. It's just we're working it out, testing a lot of the stuff that the state is pushing for, but also that Allied is being fantastic in accommodating and making sure that the science goes right along with what we do. So when Rich told me that he's going to come over here, I said, can I tag along? So I'm here as a state person, California Fire State Council person, but also a person that is doing what Rich is going to talk about. So I'm honored to be here with you and be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you still make me buy him coffee. Both of you brought up the fact that we're product agnostic at Allied. And if you need vents, the first thing you think of is let's call Acme Vent Company, and they're going to do what they can to sell you their vents, right? And their motivation is, they're not a nonprofit, and they want to solve the problem with their widget. We know all the widgets, and so we come in. We're not a widget company, a product company. We're a solution company. So we use all of the products. If there's new products that come onto the market, new products or systems, we evaluate those systems to see how effective they are they affordable, and we kind of vet these products and companies for you. So we're a one-stop shop. So we take pride in that.
Do you publish that somewhere?
I'm sorry?
Do you publish
We
which
do.
ones are okay?
No, it's just we don't get involved with reviewing companies.
Mm-hmm.
We just get involved with if we're going to use it, we're going to use it appropriately. And Jay.
So yeah, great point that you bring. So one of the things that we're working on the state creating a framework, and the framework will be a roadmap for each community on what to use and how to use it and what is state approved and what is fire marshal approved. But also you need to check with your local fire department. So for example, in the state there are 3 events approved by the state, but only 2 are approved by the county of San Diego. Mm-hmm. So we'll create a framework, we'll share with all the communities, and we hope to have that next year. And it will tell you exactly what is approved by the state fire marshal, but you still gotta check with your local fire marshal, make sure they know.
That information would come from the state fire state council down to us. We would have that.
It will come from the California Wildfire Mitigation Program,
Right.
but Fire State Council is one of the ones we're gonna use to spread the information out.
Yes.
Is there a website that would have all this?
We'll share the Rich, you're gonna share some websites.
We'll talk about Cal Fire. Cal Fire website.
We'll make sure to visit and you guys have all the
Yes.
resources.
Yeah.
that
We'll
you
make
can
sure the
share with
resources are
Thank
available.
But excuse me, the local fire department is still like our first line, right? Because it all,
Well, the states writes the fire code,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
and then the fire code, nobody can be less restricted in the state,
Right.
but you can be more
More
restricted.
restricted.
So in the case of San Diego, they said we don't like that at third band. We don't really like it for San Diego, but the basic code is written by the state.
Okay, but when it comes down to us, we have to go through our fire department and then code in the city code enforcement.
Gotta make sure that you check
Yeah.
with
If,
Okay.
for code stuff. So the state, when they develop a code, it's a minimum standard from the state of California.
Right.
And there's 3 ways we're looking at protecting a house is per the state code, which is your local authority, and then per your insurance company, which might have more restrictive than the state, and then what we look at is the science. So we know the code, we're very familiar. It's an interesting thing. We know what insurance companies want. Sometimes they over request, sometimes they under request. That's interesting. We look at the science. So we're not protecting homes based on a product. We don't look at this product and go, well, let's go put these everywhere. We look at the science and find the problem. Then we look for, we got this one or this one or this one. So we're solving the problem, the science behind the problem, not a product. If that makes sense. Okay, let's get going. So I'm going to step over here so I'm not in your way. And I was going to bring my little microphone, but I don't need it. Yeah, actually I pulled out of the garage last night and it fizzled and popped and it didn't work. So, which is too bad because Jay was going to do karaoke at the end, and April was going to do an interpretive dance about on the Great Chicago Fire.
I'll still
was
do it.
I'm sorry, was it the other way around?
Oh.
Either way, it was going to be epic. Okay, so this is I don't know if you can adjust the screen a little bit. We're trying to determine, so I apologize if it's not as clear as we'd like it to be. This is the Woolsey fire, and this is a picture that was taken probably 10 o'clock in the morning. You'd think it was midnight, but no, this is in the middle of the day. A lot of people don't realize that during a wildfire that your neighborhood looks much different than you can expect. So
But we've watched many of the San Diego fires from our
there you go.
backyard.
Yeah, there's a lot of good videos that come out and good things to pay attention to. So let's talk about the California wildfire problem. Wildfires today are larger and more intense than they were 20 years ago. They happen 4 times more often. They take 5 times longer to extinguish, and they're covering 6 times more land area. The top 20 most destructive wildfires in California, 12 of them happened in the last 6 years. Now, I've just updated this slide to include the Lahaina, so some of the numbers aren't exact, but Lahaina is definitely going to make the top 20 list. So 12 of them happened in the last 6 years. 9 in the last 3 years. And the Camp Fire up in Paradise, California, that destroyed more structures than the next 7 fires combined. So there's 18,800 structures destroyed in the Camp Fire. Number 2 is the Tubbs Fire at 5636. Now the Lahaina Fire looks like it's going to be around 2,500. I think they're still putting those numbers together. Relatively small fire as far as acreage, but damage was incredible. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's a chart showing to 2021. I don't have the updated one yet because it's still being worked on. But you can see from 1932 to 1999, those are only 2 of the most destructive California wildfires. The next 10 years here were additional 3 of the top 20. Then things started to change in right around 2010. We had, in that 10-year period, and you can see by the size of the pie chart how much bigger these fires are. There's actually a new term called a mega fire. Any fire over 100,000 square acres is a new term for a wildfire. There were 8 of them. Now, in the last 3 years, we had 8 more. So as you can see, there's a trend that's been happening that, this is 1932 to 2009, and this is the last 10 years. There's a trend, and we do not see that trend changing. And the cause of it, climate change, our movement into the wildland, all different theories, but all of it's adding up to being a wildfire problem that we don't see turning around. I added this slide back in. It was I didn't have it in my presentation for a while, but I think it's important to note the 5 deadliest wildfires in California. The Tubbs Fire, 2017, there were 22 lives that were lost. The Tunnel Fire in Oakland Hills, 1991, 25 lives were lost. Griffith Park, 1933, 29, and those were firefighters that were lost in that fire. The Camp Fire in 2018 was 83 lives were lost, and I believe till this day there's still 2 people that are unaccounted for. And as of yesterday, the Lahaina Fire, actually they changed the numbers yesterday. It was 115. They're down to 97 lives that are confirmed lost, and 31 are still missing. Yes, Jay?
And out of those 5, 4 of them have been in my career. 5 for Trish, 1933. Trish was
Oh,
around.
please, Jay.
But if we've seen the 4 deadliest fires in our career, and you talk to firefighters that have done this for many years, it's unheard of. So,
Yeah.
in one career we used to have, when we started 30 something years ago, we will see this every so often, and after the 90s it's been this and especially the last few years. So the increment is has been quite expedited and to a different level.
Yeah, I can remember the Tunnel Fire, 1991. That's a career fire. You guys, we're never going to see a fire like that again. And then we keep seeing career fires, and it started to become the normal. And it's kind of sad that we were talking on our way down. The fire service, when we started to where we are now, is totally different.
Was the tunnel fire the one that started in the tunnel, the Oakland Tunnel?
No, it was out.
Okay.
It was around the tunnel. There was
Okay.
actually a fire earlier in the morning, and then the winds came up and it picked up again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we live pretty close to that.
So a lot of people, when they talk about losing homes in the wildfire, this is what they imagine, right? You've got a home sitting in the brush of the wilderness, and this tsunami wave of flames takes out the home. Now I tell you, in this case, that is going to be the case in this instance, where this tsunami wave of fire is going to reduce that home to nothing. That's not what we see. That's not the standard, because this is what we're seeing. Okay, this is the Coffee Park in Santa Rosa. These homes are not sitting in the mountains. They're not surrounded by the native vegetation. And in one night, they lost about 1,700 homes. NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, 1710, requires that there be a minimum of 15 people at a house fire in order to effectively fight a house fire. I can tell you the standard out there is 25 to 30 for a house fire. Well, what do you do in this case where you've got 10 houses? Do we have 150 firefighters available during a wildfire to address the problem on each one of those structures? There isn't. And what do you do in this case? Right? So the reality to think that it's the answer to it is more firefighters and more fire engines, it would be impossible to have that resources and people to address each one of these individual houses that are on fire. So the answer is not more fire suppression. Now, we obviously need to support our fire service, and the more the better, and it's important that we have those resources. But the answer to your home surviving a wildfire is fire prevention. We cannot stop these fires, but we can keep these fires from destroying homes. We're not helpless in this situation at all. There is no reason why this fire that we can't stop is going to burn through, and when we're done, the home is still standing. And that's done through our hazard mitigation methodology. We're going to reduce our exposure, eliminate the threat of the fire by removing, reducing, or even relocating fuels from your house. And on the other side, we're going to increase the hardening of the structure. Okay, we're going to with fire-resistant design, community design, which is what you're getting involved with now with the FireWise and through your Fire Safe Council, because it starts at the individual homeowner, but it's got to be everyone's homes, and we'll talk about that in a second. But through fire resistant design, active systems, and things that we'll talk about today. So before you attack a problem or go against your enemy, you need to understand them, right? So there's 3 ways that homes are lost in a wildfire. There's direct flame contact. That's where you've got a house where the fuels, like that very first picture you saw, that tsunami wave, where the flames go from plant to plant to plant, and actually the flames attack that house. Direct flame contact. Next is radiant heat. And that's where maybe you've done your due diligence and created that minimum 30 feet from your structure. But beyond 30, the amount of vegetation is so massive that when it burns, the radiant heat coming off of it is sufficient to ignite the structure. That's another reason. And the third reason is embers. Now, embers, we've known this for years, but they've now proven it, that embers represent up to 90% of the structure loss during a wildfire. Here's a picture from the campfire that actually shows all 3 of the threats. You've got a vegetation here that got into the eaves, the direct flame contact. You've got radiant heat coming off of this fence that's heating up the wall. And then you've got embers flying through the air. Those are the 3 things that cause a home to be lost in a wildfire. Eliminating 2 of the 3 things is the easiest thing for you to do. To eliminate the direct flame contact and the radiant heat, you do that through vegetation management. And that is the absolute first thing that needs to be done, and it has to be done. And we know this from code. In 1965, through the PRC, the Public Resource Code, 4192, requires that you have 100 feet of brush clearance from your house. And that's broken down into the first 30 feet. So we call that the lean and green zone. So we have smaller vegetation closer to the ground with separation. Again, we're not going to stop the fire, but whatever fire is burning in that, yes, sir.
I wanted to let everybody know that in these red bags that are laying around here, we've got the information on defensible space, and it's the same information that Amber uses when she conducts the inspections. So it'll tell you all this information about the 0 to 5 foot zone, the 30-foot zone.
We'll have all this information for you.
Yes. So make sure you grab a bag.
Yep. So that first 30, we know it's going to burn, but the flames are not going to get close enough to the house for that direct flame contact. And the vegetation is so small that the radiant heat that's generated is not enough to set the house on fire. So that's that first 30 feet. That next 70 feet from 30 to 100 out, again, we're going to thin out and move everything away so when it does burn, it doesn't produce enough energy to radiate against the house and set it on fire. Now, we've been doing this since 1965, and it works. We know it works. And there's videos out there and tests that have been done. There's a movie called Elemental that has some of the stuff that Jack Cohen did that actually, they proved it. And this stuff works. And this is, again, what I just talked about. That first 30 feet, we're expecting no fire or very little fire. Then the next 70 feet, we're going to reduce it so you don't have a radiant heat. And then back here, you have your native vegetation. And of course, we'll talk a lot today about this ember intrusion.
Are there some plants that are more flammable than others? We used to live in Orcas Island, Washington, and Scotch broom is literally explosive.
Of course, laurel sumac's another one. A lot of the
Palm trees.
Fan palms.
we live in a desert,
Fan bombs.
Yes.
and the plants that are native to here, like the laurel sumac, and they're designed to survive without water, and they're actually a fire ecosystem. And the reason they survive without water is they have oils in them that help keep them help survive. It's those oils that heat up and vaporize, the same as gasoline. and those vapors are what become explosives. So there are different plants have different levels of flammability and combustibility, but that's an excellent point. It's that native vegetation that can survive without water. The reason they can survive without water makes them a fire problem. And that goes back to with the drought, when we started talking about water saving and drought resistant plants. Drought resistant plants doesn't necessarily mean fire resistant plants.
Right.
So we've changed. You'll see a change out there about, we used to say this is what you should plant, and now we're saying we used to say what you shouldn't plant, and now we're saying this is what you should plant. Yes, Jay.
So, gonna put my forester hat now, and Scotch broom is an introduced plant. It grows in Spain and from France all the way to Spain and Portugal, and is very highly flammable. So yes, native plants are adapted to fire, and native plants are adapted to take fire and then survive and then come back again. One of the main problems that we have is the non-native plants that also creates a lot of issues. So looking at your community, eucalyptus is one of them, palm trees are one of them, you were just saying that. Not only have the problem with fire, managing fire themselves, but they're kind of designed to flare up real quick and release a lot of those embers that Rich was talking about. So don't forget about the non-natives that we keep bringing to our communities, and then we have to deal. So every action has a reaction, and every tree performs differently, and vegetation performs differently. So we'll talk about that a little more. But
yeah, all vegetation will burn at some point, and the natives, while they're can be a higher threat, they're not necessarily the worst thing. I'd rather have a native than an invasive, and you can manage. You know, the brush programs. It's not brush abatement; it's brush vegetation management and dealing with the brush, not just eliminating it. Right. And you'll see. And here's an example.
I'm sorry, I've got a question. We don't want to basically go to our nurseries and depend on them to know the answer. So what's a good resource?
That's changing. But yeah.
yeah, that's changing a lot. And I'll give you some places that you can go to and look at that. There's two things. Like Rich was saying with events, the nursery want to sell what they have.
Right.
So one time we went and tried to meet with one of those big stores, Home Depot, that sells tremendous amount of plants. And I said, would you sell some vegetation that our residents in the urban interface can use? I said, this is what we get and this is what we sell and that's what we make our money.
Yeah.
So it's about selling what they have. So not necessarily you're going to.
We don't want to depend on
And it's come up over the years, many times over the years, about regulating non-native and you really can't do that either. I mean, if we came in and said, we're going to outlaw Italian cypress, then the American Association of Italian Cypress of America might have an issue with that, right?
But if we're educated consumers, if we've got a resource, we're educated consumers, and we ask for certain things, then it is up to then they'll see the wisdom in supplying those things, and we can turn that around.
And that's why we're here today.
That's correct.
That's the key. When you go over there to the plant seller, the person's gonna sell your card, and you educate yourself before you get there. You're gonna get the best product that works for you.
Yeah. Chances are the person selling the plant hasn't come to the Rich Schneider April Schwartz Day because
what
presentation. Well, we'll get there.
We try.
One day. So here's a little bit of what that looks like. So we've got a house here out in the Wooey, and that first 30 feet, everything is low to the ground, and I don't anticipate direct flame contact or significant radiant heat. That's going to protect that home. That next 70 feet, we still have vegetation. We're allowed to be a little thicker. And then you get back out to 100 feet, and you've got your native vegetation. That's a pretty good example of state mandated 30 and 100 feet.
A quick question, because we've had this discussion quite a bit recently. 30 feet, you're talking about 30 feet from the residential structure.
Correct.
Not from the property line.
Correct.
That's a different.
So
It's a different.
Man, this is for residential. When we're talking about lots that are greater than an acre, it's a
Different
30-foot
rules.
It's a 30-foot buffer around on the property line. It's different rules.
Okay, but we're in a, okay.
So this is based on science. NFPA actually identifies an exposure as 30 feet, where that radiant heat beyond 30 feet, you're not going to get that radiant heat.
How does the lower vegetation protect that hillside?
Well, that's important too. Is we've got to protect the hillsides with a root system. So there are plants that are
low that still have
the roots.
Okay.
And we don't want to take everything. We don't want to strip the hillside either.
Right.
We need
gotta
that
have-
You want to
structure,
keep the
hillside.
plants.
Yeah.
We used to, my agency, we used the term thin you win, strip you slip.
Yeah.
Slip.
So here's an example of a project where you've got all this native vegetation, but when it hits that 100 feet, we now have separation between the fuels. And this is a laurel sumac here. This is a laurel sumac, but we've removed 50 to 75% of the vegetation out of it. So when it does burn, it's not going to be this 30-foot wall of flame. It's going to be 10 or 15, and that's not going to last as long, and there's not going to be as many embers. So we're just reducing the amount of potential energy in that fuel. This is a house. This is in 2016, and overgrown. The guy was kind of a sort of hermit. No one ever saw him. I don't know if he was making chocolates in there or not, but and when the new owner bought the house, and they cleaned it up.
Ooh.
Now that's pretty dramatic to go from there to there, but it's a start. Now I took a picture of the house. I went by and took a picture of the house last night. I didn't get it into my presentation, but this is a good start. And this is kind of like a bad haircut. You know, what's the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut? About 6 weeks. Okay. So this house now looks beautiful, but you have to start with a clean slate. And if you're able to do that, if you're got that type of situation, start with a clean slate and start over. This is what it looks like when more of the mountainous communities. Again, we're just selective removal to eliminate the problem. As opposed to trying to fight the problem, we're going to eliminate the problem. Now this house has no vegetation on their property. They replaced everything with rock. This is probably from the California Drought Buster program that we all know about from 10 or 15 years ago. Actually created a lot of blight in California, my opinion. And people would come in and remove all the vegetation so you didn't have to water, and they put rock in. Okay? Not the prettiest thing. However, he's got no vegetation. So his removing vegetation because of drought, he's also made it fire safe because there's no vegetation. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. This is also fire resistant vegetation. You've got wild apple, everything's low and lean and green and low to the ground. You've got separation between the plants. So that's a fire resistant landscape. It doesn't have to be gravel and rock. However, this is still, yes ma'am.
Okay, what about fake sod? I mean, fake grass.
So
Whatever you
it's
call it.
low and it's low to the ground, so it's not going to produce a large amount of. Now there's a whole nother subject about the different ones, the chemicals that are in there, the petrochemicals and all that. It's a whole nother story. But as far as a threat to the house, as long as it's kept 5 feet away, it's going to burn. But is it going to produce the energy, and is it going to bring the flames to the house? That's what we're looking at.
Is it?
No, we'll find. You know what? I'm going to ask you that in about 30 minutes. How about that? See how well we do our job. So, even though we've got our fire-resistant landscape, I can't tell you how many times as a wildland firefighter, we're there to put out the vegetation, and the vegetation's not burning, but the home is. This is a cliff here. I can explain to you that the fire came up this hillside and set these homes on fire. I could justify that. But how do you explain the homes that are in the infield here? And they're all burning. This is a famous picture. How many of you recognize this picture? This is 1993. It was 30 years ago next month, October 28th.
I was a child.
And I know. I had to get this picture from someone else. I didn't know either. The Emerald Bay Fire in Laguna.
Yeah.
And this was all over the media as the miracle house. You know, the one house that survived. What a miracle. Well, firefighters look at this and say, well, it's not really a miracle. I mean, it was a stucco house with a tile roof, and she had no vegetation around. Ironically, this lady was self-insured.
Oh.
And it was the only house that survived. But it wasn't really a miracle. But when I look at this picture, I'm curious about the miracle vegetation. Because the vegetation didn't burn. It was just the houses. That to me was the interesting part. And of course now there's the new miracle house that everyone's been talking about in Lahaina. And that one house in Lahaina that survived. And the thing that these houses have in common, other than they're both white stucco with red roof, that had little to do with it, well, the color had nothing to do with it. This house, they went around and they cleared more than 5 feet. It was a substantial clearing around the house to protect it from termites and insect infestation. Well, like the Droughtbuster house, he had a goal of not having vegetation and the rocks aren't going to burn, so he's safe. This house has survived the fire for a different reason, but that reason was also fire safety. So that's the new miracle house everyone's talking about. The problem is embers. We just talked about houses burning and not the vegetation. It's the embers. What happens is those embers will travel for miles. They land right up next to the house in the bark mulch, in your azaleas, all of the flammable vegetation next to your house, and they'll start low intensity fires. And all of a sudden that little plant that's there produces enough heat to set the house on fire. Maybe the fire goes through the window or sets the base of the house on fire. And one of the problems is these embers can land in your planter boxes and it'll smolder for days. And quite often during a wildfire, and I'll show you an example in a few minutes here, houses will burn down 3 days after the fire front went through. Because there's billions of these little embers that are everywhere. And all they have to do is catch a leaf on fire, which is a little more energy, to something else, and all of a sudden you have a fire. Again, you got a wildland firefighter and a fully involved house. He doesn't have the 15 firefighters. The vegetation's not burning, but the house is fully involved. And there's nothing he can do about it. This is a case where none of the vegetation on the property is on fire. It wasn't direct flame contact coming into this house. You can see the vegetation's still there. It wasn't radiant heat. In fact, the tree is still there. It was embers that got into the corner of the house and set it on fire. This is a grass fire. Grass fires on the forest floor, we don't generally lose houses in grass fires. They move fast, there's low intensity, there's not enough energy, and it's not there long enough to set a house on fire. Unless, of course, that grass fire brought those low intensity flames, very fast moving, flashy fire, to the house and set the 4 coastal rosemary plants that the homeowner put underneath the deck. Now that low intensity, very manageable fire got to those plants, created a bigger fire, and burned the house down. So IBHS, the Institute for Business, Housing and Safety, insurance companies have come together and they've contracted or worked with IBHS, and they're doing testing to prove the science behind wildfires and why we're losing homes. Now IBHS, they have big wind tunnels, and what they're known for is for hurricane strapping and hurricane proof and tornado and hailstorms. They build houses and then they beat the crud out of them with different weather events, and then out of that they design new designs, new products to help protect homes. Well, now they're doing it for wildfire. They've been doing this for several years now. They came out with a report probably going on a year ago now, pretty close to a year ago, proving the science to how homes are being lost in a wildfire. They built these structures, they put them in a wind tunnel, and they threw embers at it. And they document how homes are lost. So now we document the science. Out of that came the 0 to 5 foot zone. This is something, if you haven't heard about it yet, you will be hearing about it. It's probably will be the most important zone, I believe, in all of this. Fires burning within 5 feet of your house is what's taking the house out. Now this is coming into the code. It'll be in the California Code January for new.
But it's January 2025 for new construction, January 2026 for existing.
So starting in January, new construction needs to provide a vegetation management plan that shows there's nothing within that 5 feet. We're going to design this 5 feet into the new homes. Next year, 2026, they're going to go retroactive, which means when you do your annual brush inspection, the fire department's going to look for the 100 to 30, and now they're going to talk about that 0 to 5. Now that's in the works. Jay is actually working very close with that as to exactly what that looks like. As a start, it's nothing in that zone. And I think they're slowly figuring out what's going to be acceptable. But based on the science, we know there should be nothing in that 5 foot zone. So we're science, we approach the science behind it. So our recommendation, IBHS's recommendation is there is nothing in there.
When you say nothing, what do you mean?
No mulch,
Nothing
no
flammable.
plants, no
You
trash
have grass.
no grass. I'll give you some examples here. Okay? And that's based on the science of wildfire. It's not based on code. It's not based on how it looks and how you want it to. We're science-based people here. It is what it is. This is what the science is showing. So here's an example, 0 to 5. We've got the bougainvillea. Anybody have bougainvillea? You ever tried to trim bougainvillea? You're stock up on Band-Aids. But here you've got trash cans and bougainvillea, and in this case, this is actually in my community, and I got this picture from the police department because I was going out with them on the neighborhood watch program, and they were talking about how to secure your home from robberies and burglaries and privacy. And they were saying, look, if you put this here, it's got thorns on it, and burglars aren't going to come in and this. And then the second half of the meeting, I said, okay, all that stuff that cop just said, no, you're going to burn your house down. And I'm like, well, we're not going to invite you back. So there's a balance between privacy and fire safety. Okay, so bougainvillea, bad idea. Okay. Again, we're setting trees up next to the house, up into the eaves. I think that's a mock orange. But everything, we want our privacy. So let me see if I can get this working from here. There we go. This is an Italian cypress. Okay. These are.
Look at the embers coming off.
That's a huge part of it. So the amount of energy being produced, and I don't know if you can see it, the roof and the house is starting to smoke. We've got some trash cans here. More than likely, I don't know the story behind this one, more than likely it was probably a trash can fire or maybe barbecue coals, who knows. But it's on fire. And these are very intense. They last for a long time. A tremendous amount of energy. We don't have to play the whole video, but yeah, this house does catch on fire just from radiant heat. And the fire department is coming. But see these embers? They're traveling for blocks. So if those embers land 2 blocks away and they call 911, but the fire department's already got everything coming here, in order to attack that fire, we now have to call a fire station that's even further away. And so you can see how this compounds. And if that other house has Italian cypress and those people go, we're just going to make it even more. This is without a wind. This is no wind.
Yeah,
you can see that it's going straight up. And I know that all looks like smoke right there. That's all embers. Billions of little firebrands that are spreading out through the neighborhood. So yeah, these Italian cypress, what's the word? No bueno.
No bueno.
But there's an example of how, and I think that's 3 of them. There's a line of them, and I apologize. The screen's so hard to see, but that's 3 or 4 of those trees.
You cannot even get close to
No.
it because the heat is just intense on your face.
Well, you've reminded me. We've spoken with our local fire departments, the Escondido Fire Department, the local firehouses, etc., and they've told us, you know, we've got one way in and out of this particular place, and the other end of it is covered with this canopy of trees. And they've told us that in the event of a wildfire in this area, they said they would do their best to save lives. They are there to save lives. Your property is a different matter. And if they've got to dispatch all these people, they're not going to risk firefighters' lives to go in and save your stereo. They're not going to do it. And I don't blame them. And so if we're depending on it in a fire situation where we're trying to evacuate and get the heck out of here, that anybody's going to come up here and risk their lives, they're going to be told not to because of the danger in the area. So that's what the Fire Safe Council does, is we work in the area to help take care of that canopy of trees, talk about different evacuation routes, other things like that. But homeowners, all of us, including us, we need to do what we've got to do to keep to reduce the likelihood of an event like that.
It's a community problem that starts in your backyard. Yes, sir.
Something that I don't know how to find the balance of that. I understand about the 5 feet around the property for safety, but I was always thinking about the amber, in which maybe, as you were just saying, maybe 1 block from your house. So what is the 5 feet? I mean, obviously it helps a lot, but with the amber only.
We're jumping in.
Okay.
I hope I'll answer your question in a second. So we went